Start our meeting. It's gone 9 o'clock. Morena, everybody. Welcome to the Operations Committee meeting. And Councillor Cranston, would you like to give us a karakia, please?
Sure. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora tātou, kia tai mai nei, mō tēnā hui. Harikawa hau ki te kanohi, pai rao aki ki te hui zui. Mihi atu ki tēnei whare, te whare awarua. He mihi ki ngā mātei katoa, hei ngā mātei, haere, 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 moi mai rā. Ki te hunga ora ai tau nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. He karakia au ki te nori te ao Māori, me te whakamana te riti o Waitangi. Anei take karakia. Manaki tia tēnei hui, manaki tia tēnei rōpū. Manaki tia a mātou whānau, huri noa i te motu, huri noa i te ao huri huri. Manaki tia nā kaupapa o te rā. Arāhina nā whiriwhiri whakaro kei wainganui a mātou. Arāhina nā whiriwhiri kōrero kei wainganui a mātou. Arāhina nā pātai, arāhina nā ture nei kia puta ai te marama. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy. I'd just like to welcome our Director of Lifelines, Dave Wilson, with me on the side here. Okay, we've got apologies from Councillor Akahara Brown. Is there any other apologies? No? Okay, I'll move we accept those apologies. All those in favour? Right, okay. Any declarations of interest today? We've got quite a small agenda, but confirmation of minutes, and that's on page 5. So we'll go to those. Of confirmation of non-confidential minutes, page 5. Moved by Councillor Seymour, seconded by, oh, sorry, Your Worship. And seconded by Councillor Hughes. All those in favour? We'll go to the action sheet on page 9. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a matter arising. Yep. It's page 7 of 36, and I mean, we've had our lovely long, reasonably dry summer, and now we're into winter. So I wonder how much progress we've made on the Ruatoria water supply. If you look at the first bullet point, it talks about, you know, the running costs, and we're moving on the investigation, if you like. And I guess investigation is not going to be so easy through winter. So I wondered what the current status of that program was, please.
Through you, Chair, they had a blessing yesterday and started the drilling investigation works.
He's got it on.
Oh, sorry. So the works for the drilling investigation at Whakatua Park started yesterday. The team had been delayed by COVID, but the drilling investigations are underway. They expect those to go through quite quickly.
Thank you.
Your Worship.
My brains aren't working this morning, so Councillor Woolsnop contacted me 2 days ago. She is an apology for today. She is attending a funeral, so I will move that we include her in the apologies. Thank you.
By Worship Premier, seconded by Councillor Moringa. All those in favour?
All right.
I have one very important one too, Mr. Chairman, in terms of Ruatoria water supply. Very good blessing yesterday, attended by 2 council staff, 4 contractors, and 5 Whakatua Park board members. Note, no one else. That's why I've been tasked to speak to this one. We had a full board meeting last, when I say full, those that normally attend. I just want to explain the position in terms of where our chairman is and his interaction with council going forward. Whakatua Park is an autonomous body set up by an Act of Parliament. We are nominated from within the wider community and appointed, note, appointed by the Maryland Court.
Point of order, is this a...
Yes, it is. It is. This is relevant, very relevant, because it states there that we have partnered with the Runanga o Ngāti Porou and other representatives. We haven't partnered with anyone. The council and a memorandum of understanding is where we are. I just want to make that clear.
Okay. You've said your piece, okay, sweet. We'll move on. Lee, all right. So we're going to the action sheet. Is anything on the action sheet that we want to? That's on page 9. Any comments on the action sheet at all? Everything looks like it's in place and things progressing.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr.
Councillor
Chairman.
Seymour.
On the second page, or report 21245 and 2233 are similarly around resource recovery and waste. And some of the questions could be asked, I guess, later in the paper because it was due last month. But the report to the April Operations Committee on the Recovery Centre regarding waste, will that be adequately covered later, or does anyone wish to make any comment now? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Through you, Chair, the Recovery Centre will be coming in another report. It has been delayed at this stage, so we won't be able to get that one through in time.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to talk about it later on in the meeting if you want us to.
Thanks very much.
Okay, we've got a leave of absence. We've got no acknowledgements and tributes, public input or petitions. We've got no extraordinary business or notice of motion, no adjourned business, reports of the Chief Executive of Staff, and we're on to our information reports from infrastructure services. And that's on page 11, our June 2020 weather event.
So just
Dave Hatfield.
just while Dave's coming up, these reports do start to run into each other. So this is 2020. Few people have questioned us whether or not we got the dates right. So this is the 2020, not the 21 or the 22 event. So this is one that was requested by the committee as to update of where we were spending on the 2020 event alone. Yes, these are starting to merge into some of them, but we still have these works to get out and get underway at the same time.
Just through the chair, I'd like to just take the report read. The only issue that's going to come through is delivery. Potentially there could be up to $4 to $5 million that won't get delivered, and that's just because since the report was written, we've had 2 other events, and so just the impact of COVID on our roading staff, not just roading staff, but our contractors as well. So we're just working through that. They're slowly all coming back on board. The work's been contracted out. It's just that 30 June deadline.
So we'll get done. It's just not this financial year.
That's right. Oh, that's right. That's right.
Councillor Robinson.
So can you explain, please, the statement in paragraph 21, which says the main outcome is to complete as much work as possible before June 30, you just said, but then you've said that after the time, the funds will be reduced from the 88%, which obviously is a cost implication for ratepayers. And then you said most of the expenditure, 10 million, but the report says we got 13.3 million from the government under that 88% subsidy. So can you clarify, are we going to lose any of the money, the emergency funding, the 88% subsidy money that the government gave us, if we don't get the money by the 30th of June?
So we, through you, Chair, we'll be working with Waka Kotahi, and we've already signalled to them we're struggling with COVID and with weather related to see if we can carry over the 88% into next financial year. We're also talking to them about how we're going to bundle the events that we have going on at the moment and how we can try and look at a different rate for that. And I know Her Worship the Mayor's already written to ministers around the funding assistance rates from Waka Kotahi for these events.
So what is the answer to my question? Are we going to are we going to lose the funding or not? Will Waka Kotahi approve that funding carrying forward, or is there a real risk that some of that funding will be lost?
Yeah. As of today, that from the 30th of June or 1st of July, that will drop from 88 to 60 to 68%. So there's potential risk if we don't deliver this $4 million, there could be $1 million of ratepayer impact. So we'd have to juggle the program to suit but that's as of today. There's a lot that's been happening and because of the other events, but that's all I can say. And just to confirm, even though we've got 88% funding for that, the first 10 million, the rest it was rated at 68%. It's just the way the funding rules go. So you've got to spend that bit first before you can get into the 88%. So
Councillor Seymour.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the report because, the committee did ask for it. Can I just check on the bottom of page 12? And because I'm trying to read it in conjunction with possibly the chapter of attachments above, is it really both paragraphs mean June 2020 emergency work? What does one mean June 2021?
No, this is the 68. 68.
Yes. Can you just explain?
yes, through the chair, they're the same event, but that was probably what I didn't explain before, is that 68% that actually has to be spent first before you
Yes.
can get into the 88%. But
Thank
it's
you.
one total event.
So thank you. And supplementary then, if you look further up at the catchments, and this is the kind of thing that I honestly think we need to know and that our public want to know. We talk about the Waipoa Tauranga catchment, the Hikawai Uawa. Of those sites, it would be really good to know how many were repaired and how many now are going to need to be reassessed and be much worse, because a lot of them were never repaired because of all the things that has just been mentioned, COVID and a variety of other things that delayed. But our roads are going to the pack fast and climate's not helping.
No.
But at the end of the day, we do have an obligation to provide reasonably safe, I say, transport for our constituents. And dare I say, people are still paying enormous rates for roading. And we've introduced, and we all need to remember, a forestry rate for those who might only have a small amount of forest. So they're paying on a pastoral farm a large chunk towards roading, which they will only benefit from once in 30 years. And they're not benefiting from it at all at the minute. We have, and I've not made a fuss about a couple of roads on Whangarei because they're not as bad as roads up the coast, but they do have residual matters from the storm event and culverts that have never been cleaned. So could we have a report next time, or maybe get done in 2 meetings time, on how many of those catchments have actually been attended to? If you've got 135 sites, there must be some accountability back to the contractors so that we know how much is being fixed and how much is still to happen. And do we understand what that is, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Just through the chair as well. I mean, the funders have already said, look, there must be some mingling between what's happened in the last event and what's not been done. So they're asking for that transparency as well. There's like, have some sites actually got worse before you got to them. So
But
you're
show
actually
you
asking for more funding, or which ones have been done, and then they failed again, because of whatever reason. So
I know it's tough because somebody has to find the time to do that assessment and get out around the roads and make those assessments again. But it is about how we manage to keep at least some level of access for our community. And you guys need to know what's your priority to spend, to focus the money on it. And then we need to negotiate with Waka Kotahi to insist that they still can provide us the best quality subsidy.
So through the chair, just for the committee's awareness, the assessments for the event that we've experienced last week is about a 6-week time frame for us to go through and have a reasonable assumption on what the cost will be from the damage to the network. Because we need the engineers to go through, check the bridges, check the culverts, and actually do a proper pricing on it rather than driving past and guesstimates. So just so you're aware, it'll be 6 weeks for us to assess the damage across the whole network now, and the teams have started that work. It's underway. Once we've got our funding application, can I suggest the report that comes back to the committee is the holistic one that tells you all of what's out on the network, what the program looks like and what the request is going to be. But just so you're aware, that's not a short process because we need to get it right. Because once we make that application to Waka Kotahi, it has to be right. There's no negotiation once we've lodged it. So just so you're aware, it's at least 6 weeks for the assessment. Then we have the meetings with Waka Kotahi. So it'll be after we've done that. Happy to bring something back that brings together all of the events and all the outstanding stuff on the network, if that's okay.
Yeah. My question would be that if all this work has been done now for the 6 weeks and 6 weeks to take what's happened 3 weeks ago, and we have a major event right now, how does that all, do we start all over again? Or, I mean, I know we're being absolutely bombarded at the moment, and it's just catastrophic, and I just so feel for what's happening out there with the roads, but you know, logistically, it's just, it must be a nightmare.
Yep.
Because you look at something 3 weeks ago and assess it, and then you have to look at it again on Monday and start all over again.
So through you, Chair, these are extreme weather events that we're dealing with at the moment. This isn't normal, the volume of rain we're having, the intensity, and to be back here 6 months later or 7 months after we've already been to Tokomaru Bay, to be back again, and then less than a week later, we're back again. Roading's still in response mode. So when we have a weather event, we cut access through a track for people so that they can get through. First time it's in a four-wheel drive, and then we go back and try and tidy it so a car can get through. But there are numerous sites all across the network that are literally down to one lane where a bulldozer's cut a track through. We're still getting people access to their homes in Kaiawa, for example. So this is still very much response function to then start the assessment happens as well. So we were literally only just going to start that this week because we've still been in response, and our contractors need time as well for them to have breaks while we're still responding to another one.
Councillor Burdett.
You know, we need to exercise a bit of patience over these storms. I just want to join with your worship. Nadine, I heard the reports. I've been out and looked, these two at the top table, our staff, the volunteers, the contractors and their guys, they're absolutely flat out. And they've attended to the urgent stuff that's been prioritised, I presume, by roading. It's just amazing what they have achieved so far. But given what's happened to the district, and I've seen most of it now in the northern area, it's going to be a long time before all this is fixed. The stuff from the last May, June is still lying there in places like Kokoro Road, and then they get another smattering. So, yeah, I think we should just exercise a little bit of patience. They know what they're doing, and let them get on with the job.
Yeah, fantastic. Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd just like to ask, we've got unique geology, unique rainfall events, 3 significant events in 3 consecutive years that are continuing to cause damage. And we've got a partner that is providing generic support with these timeframes. Do we need to be lobbying for something, for a different type of support package for the East Coast that can run multiple years, can be adjusted for climate change? Is it something that we need to be reaching out for? Because we can't continue to fight fires like this. We can't continue to have to worry about achieving the funding if it's going to be year on year on year. Is that something that staff would like us to try and help with?
Through the chair, so we're already on that. So there's a letter that's all prepared for Her Worship to send in to Waka Kotahi with that very purpose in mind.
Just a supplementary to that, we had clear discussions in the last month with both Waka Kotahi and the Minister of Transport, making it clear that the funding is not fit for purpose. It doesn't work for us. This is the 5th, 6th event now that we've had in this financial year, and we need more flexibility. And they were half open to it. So we'll see how it goes once we really need to start talking about terms. But it is something that they are well aware of, and we will need to push significantly.
Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you. If it hasn't been already, I'm really happy to move this paper for noting and absolutely want to acknowledge the vast amount of mahi that's been achieved across the roading teams through 5, 6 events now, and it just never seems to end. So really want to acknowledge Fu Daves and your teams. It's amazing. Now, the question I have is, Councillor Dowsing is quite right. we do seem to be moving into a different model of managing our roading network, and my question is around the potential for the private-public relationship, where you've got road users, usually on reasonably isolated rural roads, who are out there currently burning diesel and getting roads open and to themselves and their neighbours. I know in the past it's probably been really tricky to manage, but is it potentially part of a new relationship, a new model? If we're going to throw all the options in the air, is that one of them?
Through you, Chair, the issue that we have is anybody who's on the network, as a PCBU, Nadine is in charge of them, and we have real concerns about anybody being on the network that we don't have health and safety visibility over. So the challenge for us in that is health and safety, and it's not worth the risk for anybody to have people that we don't know who aren't accredited on the network. It's too dangerous. We know that it happens, and we ask people not to do it, but it is a real concern for us from a PCBU point of view.
Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, just a bit of clarity around 12, the closure of those sites. I assume the 20 sites that have been permanently closed are sites that are not currently being used anyway. They've been essentially closed for a while. Haven't they?
Yes, they're historic stockpile. Basically the materials just been put on the side of the road, and it's just the idea is to clean those up. Now, some of that's been delayed, but that's the intention, is to clean them up, and it's just more to stop. Because usually what happens then, they become by default solid waste disposal sites, carcasses. So that's why we
Yeah, that's
shut
the
them off.
unintended consequence when you get rid of them. People can illegal dump somewhere else.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Paragraph 20 talks about climate change and the quality, I think, or lack thereof, in some of the suppliers' rudimentary attempts. What steps are we undertaking to assist them to provide us really, really good quality, contracts, I guess, or tenders? I don't think it's acceptable for us to hope they will develop as more tenders go to market over time. I think it's incumbent upon us, given council's really clear commitment made in November last year, that's five months ago, that we say this is the quality we want, and we're going to help you get to it.
We have tender debriefs, and so when we had the provincial growth fund, we sat down with all the contracts and say this is what the future is with contracts about social procurement. So we haven't done it with climate change, but at our next meeting, when we sit down, we'll sit down with them and say, hey, your tenders, or the percentage of what we are going to put forward for tenders in terms of weighting, climate change is going to be an important factor. So it's just a change. It was just a big focus on growth and social local employment, which is still important, but now it's just, there's another shift that they're going to have to get used to, and it's the council want climate change as a higher weighting in their tenders.
Do you have all drafts or samples that you can provide them from other councils? So this is, the level of quality we want to expect.
So through you, Chair, the issue we have is with the roading industry around their climate change initiatives. You have some huge, big, high-level ones around converting to electric vehicles or biodiesel or things like that. However, when we're talking individual weighting of tenders, we want to see what that means for us here in Tairāwhiti on that job. So you can have the corporate commitment of what they're doing at a national level, which doesn't actually translate to here in Tairāwhiti when you say, well, we want to see what that actually means for these jobs. What we've been doing is normally we would have had our quarterly meeting with all the contractors by now, where we would have done, as you're saying, walk them through some examples of what does good look like when it comes to climate change. So there's examples around using the closest rock that we can, even if it's not 100% up to spec. Is it over spec? Well, then that's great. We'll use that rather than carting from other areas. Looking at short haulage, looking at some of the things that they can do on the ground to try and keep machine running times down. But then it's also the hard part for that is when we're talking with our partners around how do we report on that, we need them to actually have some reporting mechanisms for it as well, not just saying, oh, we used 20 tonne less of carbon by doing it this way. How do we know that? Where's the reporting come from and those things? So it's working through to actually make sure that they can give us those tangible ones on the ground rather than using the ones that are at a really high level that we couldn't really use in reporting back to you as to we've managed to save this much CO2. So we're working through those examples with them at the moment, but it is something the whole industry is struggling with.
Final. So from our own internal measuring system, obviously we've had contractors provide us reports which have calculated our CO2 emissions, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever the various contractors give you has got to somehow be compatible with our matrix for measuring it. So shouldn't we give them what we need so that we don't have to then translate what they give us to meet our needs?
Through each year, that's what we do.
So it's usually done on a weightings basis. So if you strengthen this weighting, which one are you going to weaken?
Through each year, it's exactly right. And that's something we have to take into account when we're looking at work. And we've talked to the committee about how we do those weightings, depending on the job, depending on the size of it, the contract and those things. So the maintenance contracts, for example, they have far more weighting around climate change. And we're looking for that as part of the mobilisation for how they're going to report that and how they're going to reduce that over time. For some of our smaller jobs, we've got to be careful around the weightings that we throw into climate change because it will completely outdo our budget. So it is a real balancing act depending on the type of job, the longevity of it and what we're doing, and can we actually make a meaningful impact with what we're trying to do on those jobs as well.
Thank you. Councillor Sheldrake.
Thank you. Just out of interest, what would be the size of the workforce across this country for us? The numbers involved, employees.
Yeah, you know, at the peak of our the event we had 2 weeks ago, you know, we actually had up to 50 individual crews plus traffic management. It was up to 200 odd staff, and there was a lot of support staff behind that as well in terms of health and safety. So, and that's in terms of the social procurement. And even though we just have to make sure that as much is spent in the local economy as possible. All we know is from Downer, the only approval we gave to bring internal people was health and safety advisors, just because basically with so many contractors out, we just didn't have enough internal resources to support that. But the physical works was all local.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Before we move on, I'd just like to acknowledge and thank all the staff involved with the voting all around our region. I mean, it's been unbelievable what the work has been done over the last few weeks. I mean, we saw the Tokomaru Bridge get reinstated within 3 or 4 days, well, within a week. I mean, that was phenomenal, the amount of rock that was put in place. So, it's been an absolute team effort right around getting all our roads up and running as best as possibly can at the moment. So, hopefully this new deluge is not going to impact too much, fingers crossed. But I think we need to really thank the staff on all the roading network people. Done a fantastic job. Okay, this paper's been moved by Councillor Faulkner, seconded by Councillor Burdett. All those in favour? Right, we'll move on to page 19, is the Gisborne District Council Future Recycling and Rubbish Collection Services. Yeah. Wheelie bins. Woo. Right, we've got a presentation for this. This is Chloe, is it? Yep. And we've got Chloe Howard-Lloyd, Solid Waste Advisor. Morning, Chloe.
One. Kia ora everyone. I'm Chloe Howard-Lloyd and I'm from the Solid Waste team, and I'm currently the Solid Waste Advisor here at GDC. Today I'm going to conduct this brief on the future of recycling and refuse for Tairāwhiti. This brief is in support of a report that has been submitted and will take no longer than 10 minutes. I ask that all questions are held until the conclusion of this brief.
Can anybody tell that that Chloe may be ex-army at all? Just.
You'll put your hands up in vain in the next 10 minutes. Okay.
The scope of this brief is as shown.
Right.
Background. Council currently manages curbside collection through a waste and management and minimalisation service contract, which is due to expire on the 3rd of June 2022. The current collection cycle in Gisborne City works on a 5-day rotation, which is shown above Figure 4 urban collection routes. Stickers are sent with rates invoices and can also be purchased from some local shops for $2.80 per sticker. Bags are provided by homeowners or tenants and are placed at the end of their driveway for collection. There are a number of issues that have been identified in the report with our current waste system, which requires a change to meet better outcomes for Tairāwhiti. The solid waste team is investigating how we best move forward in transitioning the city to a wheelie bin system. The government recently announced a plan to improve the waste management system across the country to incentivise the separation of waste at the curbside and reduce carbon emission. MFE are currently conducting their consultation on the government's proposed plan using the Transforming Recycling Discussion document. The consultation runs until the 8th of May 2022. So what systems are other regions using? There are many different systems being used throughout the other regions, all being wheelie bins, but a good example of this is the Christchurch system. Christchurch introduced a wheelie bin system, which already meets the government's intent for separating waste streams. They currently use 3 wheelie bins, which are colour-coded on the lid. Green is organics, yellow is recycling, and red is for general waste. So how might a wheelie bin system look for us? There are a few steps we need to take before we can provide what this may look like. The process to implement a wheelie bin system is shown on the flowchart above and can be broken down into 6 steps. Step 1 is to investigate different options of wheelie bin sizes and how we may need and what we may need. For example, we may need a smaller one for general waste and a larger one for recycling and one for organic waste. Step 2, confirm initial startup costs. This involves how much it will cost for us to roll out the wheelie bins. Step 3, work with the finance team to establish a budget. Step 4, present findings and options to council. Step 5, work through a procurement plan and tender. And step 6 is the implementation of the service. The timeframe for the implementation will be reliant on what funding is available and when. This concludes the brief. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Right. Councillor Robinson.
So current solid waste contract expires on June. How long is it? When is that contract?
It's a 7-year contract. For your worship.
Sorry?
It was a 7-year contract. They do have 1 more year of renewal potentially.
So the current 7-year contract expires in 3 months. And we are now commencing a research project, which is going to give us a result in September. Do you think that's good planning on our behalf? Because I don't.
To the chair, they have 1 more year potentially of performance for us to renew it past that.
So are you telling us that we can push that contract date out to 2023?
Yes.
Will we do that?
We'll negotiate that with waste management.
Because obviously if we're going to go to wheelie bins and we're going to sign a new contract, it's kind of imperative that the new contract takes that into account.
So through the chair, one of the things we're trying to work through with waste management and with the waste industry is how we would convert to wheelie bins as part of this. And whether or not waste management are the right company for us, we need to work with waste management. Whether or not there's some options we will bring you around the procurement, whether or not we recommend a renewal of the waste management contract, or if we test the market, we obviously would like to test the market, but we also need to do a market sounding report to bring that back to actually see who are the players in the market who can step up to this type of wheelie bin supply and what that means. So we need to do that part of it. We also need to work with Waste Management around their appetite. Obviously, they want to have an extension, but it's also performance based with them. So we're working through those parts of it, and we also need to negotiate the rates for that as well.
Okay, so the first part you spoke about the Waste Management's possibility of handling bins and going to market. I didn't get that sense out of this report. This report talks to us about investigating wheelie bins and maybe get some feedback from public and blah, blah, blah. What you've talked about is actually really, really critical and is the nub of the issue. And I'm disappointed that corridor is not in this report.
Through the chair, we haven't had any discussions with Waste Management flicking over without a mandate from council around the collection system. So the collection system is a council decision as to whether or not we move away from the current contract. That's going to take time to mobilise, from the manufacture of the bins to the rollout of them. So just to clarify, sorry, we wouldn't be looking to roll that out as part of a rollover of the Waste Management contract. We're looking at how we would roll out wheelie bins, which we need to check with our community because there will be implications around that collection system. So this is around communicating with them.
This council has made a commitment to reducing our carbon footprint. The amount of green waste identified going in the current system is something like 38%. It's 1 million kilograms. It has a massive footprint. We've committed on behalf of our community to reducing that. Are you saying that we're going to go back to the community and say, well, this is the best way to do it, but what do you think about it? I thought we had committed to go down that pathway, and that really it's about finding out the most competitive way to achieve that.
Through the chair, we're doing our due diligence on moving forward with what you're asking, councillor. So we are looking at how we will do that, and this has been identified by staff as the best option around diverting the waste out. The issue will become around whether or not we can afford it as a community and whether or not we'll be able to get the capture that we're after. So collecting the waste is one thing, then being able to deal with it, and it's some of the nuances around the waste stream, around the food collection, will we be able to deal with that, as opposed to green waste? What are the different options, and how will we actually be able to process it once we're able to collect it? So those are the things we need to do the due diligence on to be able to bring you back the numbers for this.
Can this be done before September? We have an election in October. And seriously, I don't want to not be in a seat here next year if I'm not here, hoping the next council finally gets around to addressing this, and we've got a year contract with Waste Management coming up for finalisation. Can this not be brought back in 3 months?
Through the chair, we'll move this through as fast as we can, but we also need to make sure we undertake the right amount of due diligence on it.
We've got Councillor Forringer next.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for bringing this paper to us, Dave. Chloe, I'm happy to move the paper. I feel the frustration that Councillor Robinson has in regards to this this subject. This is a subject we've been discussing as a table prior to many of the people that are in this room have been here. So I'm really stoked that we're on this journey. I hear you in regards to having meaningful conversations with our community about what the impact could possibly be for them. Notably, you mentioned this in your what engagement for Māori would look like, particularly in the rural setting and things like that. So I am glad that you're taking an engaging approach, but do also agree with Councillor Robinson. And also I hear this from you as well, that you want to hit this with some speed, but there's a fine balance between speed and meaningful engagement. And I have my faith in our team in order to be able to land that. So I'm really happy to move this paper. Really keen to see this through, whether it's this iteration of council or next iteration of council, but please let it be the latest next iteration of council. Thank you very much.
Okay, we've got Councillor Seymour.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the author for the paper. But through you, Mr. Chair, to perhaps Mr. Wilson, I think would it be really helpful if we looked at authorities closer to home and smaller, similar demographic populations. And I'm very aware that Whakatane Aohope have had wheelie bins for ages, and Mayor Bond told me it actually generated savings for them when they bought them in. And I think I do remember saying that in this range some time ago. It works really well over there, and they have an 80 kg, kg or litres, but the 80 size bin weekly, which is just your regular rubbish. They don't have a separate collection for food, and they have two 240 bins, one for green waste and one for all of your recycling, except bottles, fortnightly. And so cardboard and clean paper are saved, and that goes fortnightly, and green waste goes the alternate fortnightly. So 2 bins are picked up every week, and it's been in place for ages. They have a similar demographic to our own. And it seems to work really well. So, and I'm not sure how far up the coast it goes to Councillor Sheldrake, but imagine that you might need to still use transfer stations as we have, because we do need to be practical about what we can afford in the rural areas. But that's a really good place close to home that might be worth having a conversation. Thank you.
Through the chair, just to assure the committee, I know Chloe and the team have looked right across the country at a whole range of different collections. So one of the things, there is no shortage, particularly with our membership of waste mins, around lessons learned, the way to do this, the different procurement options. So there are a number that the team have looked through, which will feed into our recommendation going forward as to what size bin for the collection for our community here.
Okay, Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. Someone seconded this? Has it been moved?
It's been moved by Councillor Forringham and it hasn't been seconded yet. So you can second it.
I think it's really exciting. Progress is slow in council often, and looks like we're getting somewhere here. But I was really alarmed at the 200,000 for communications to tell people how to use them.
So I Sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't speak to this point. So I've been in close communications with Angela Atkins from the Hastings Council, and they had even larger budget than that for communications, and they still ran into a lot of issues. So they had to educate the population on how to use the wheelie bins they had appropriately, what goes into an organic bin and what doesn't. So your fish and chip paper, for example, can go into your green waste organic bin as well. And when they did the rollout, they sectioned off Hastings and rolled out wheelie bins in certain areas, and then people thought as soon as they got a wheelie bin they could start putting their rubbish in it, but the system wasn't set up that they could do it straight away, and it still had a start date, so they still ran into quite a few issues in that way. And they said it was they said from their experience they again would put a lot of emphasis on the education of the wheelie bin systems to make sure they're used correctly, because if they're dumped incorrectly, it affects the rest of it contaminates everything else that's with it. So it's very important that when we roll this out, we have a very solid baseline on how to separate those waste streams to ensure that we don't run into the same issues.
Thank you. And we don't have any operational costs, and someone spoke to that, but do you have an idea from speaking to these other places about that?
So I know for the wheelie bin implementation just for Hawke's Bay, just for the wheelie bins themselves, it cost over $1 million, and that was a couple of years ago. Inflation and other things at play now, and I'm not sure how that's going to affect our prices. Just the bins.
So the operational costs depend very greatly on the route, how many people would do them on. We're hoping that we'll get some economies of scale. Don't forget, where Tuesday's our worst day when it comes to rubbish collection. Monday and Tuesdays, they do the biggest runs in the city. We're hoping we'll be able to break that up to be able to do bigger areas faster with the wheelie bin. They normally are faster, but it's the health and safety component's the really big thing, but it really does depend on how you roll out your collection that goes with it. But it should be quicker, but those are the things we need to know the hard numbers on as to what will this actually do to our ongoing costs, the OPEX rather than the CAPEX.
Okay, Councillor Dowsing.
Thank you. Yeah, this issue certainly predates me. I remember Mayor Foon promoting wheelie bins, so I'd like to share Councillor Robinson's concerns that we are coming to the end of the contract and looking at and starting to look at the implementation plan. It would have been nice to have seen this implementation plan in here. And I think it comes down to the fact that we can't afford not to do this. This is the low hanging fruit for our carbon reduction. This is something that's been highlighted so many times in this room, from the fact that our current bin system allows plastic waste to blow down our streets on a windy day, to the fact that we're not achieving any waste reduction, and simply having mixed collection is a continuation of a very old concept for waste collection. So yeah, whilst it may need to go to the community, it feels to me like this it's coming, and it's been made around this table many times. We just want to see it implemented.
Your worship.
I'm very excited about this. Our community have spoken to us at several iterations around 10-year plans. And what was an eye-opener for me on page 22 is when we do look at where our emissions come from, we can tinker around the edges with e-vehicles and transport stuff, but our main contributor is our waste. So how we deal with that can have a better impact. I just want to urge us as a council, as we go through this process and we get to the end of it, which might be in September or have it roll over next year, that we start doing that education really early. It is so important that we take our community with us on this, because everyone has a role to play. Just in this paper, if you stack your cart box in too tight, when the truck lifts it, it won't fall out. So it's little practical stuff where our community can play their role. So it would be wonderful if we can slowly have those discussions and also make everyone aware that they are just as responsible as we are for collecting and then getting rid of this. And then Dave, I'm sure we will, there are bigger containers which might only be collected, say, every 2 weeks. So there's the type of savings or discussions we can have with our provider. But for me, this is the way forward. What we have currently is not fit for purpose, because sometimes I do come down Matokitoki Valley and you can see the wind just ripping some stuff. And I know people are supposed to have their papers in a bag tied up, but it doesn't always happen. So I think this is the smarter way to make sure we get the recycling separated from the waste. I'm still very, very interested to see how we separate and what we do with food waste or organic waste, because I can remember from last election that when we looked into our numbers, it was 25% of our waste stream. It's a massive amount that we can deal with. Some people compost those or look at it in different ways, but I do know that there are councils that take care of that as well. So I'll be very keen for that, because I think that's where we will make a massive impact. But thank you for this paper. I'm very excited, and I know our community will support this as well, with education to sit alongside this, because we want to be smart with our rubbish and our recycling.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, thanks. I was just wondering whether you can input some outside the square thingy. Probably 5 years ago, I went to Bunnings and spent $120. And since then, I've never had to put any green waste out at the gate. I have no green waste because I have a small worm farm. And we've got a family of 3, and it takes care of absolutely everything. It seems to me an efficiency of even funding a worm farm of $120 to people with no ongoing costs after that would be an operational saving, a huge operational saving, and we wouldn't need the green bin. I know it's a little bit, well, there's a lot of education required to sort of get that thing working, but I am amazed at the small size of my worm farm and just how it gets rid of everything I've got in the way of green waste at a very small cost. So, you know, some of that thinking into the paper would be great.
I can speak to that a little bit. So on my property, I have a septic system. It's also a worm one, and we have a pig, so I don't have food scraps. And that's right. So since I'm sort of living that lifestyle, I'm very aware of these other things that people can do. When you're in more of a condensed urban area, people's property sizes aren't always the same. There is a lot of time pressure on people that are working full-time, and so, would look at wanting to ease some of that, whereas sometimes when you're in the country or a more rural area, it's a no-brainer that we do things like that. So I hear what you're saying, and I have thought about some of these options, but I do like the idea of organic waste relevant.
Sure. No. Through the chair, just also, council does also subsidise the Tairāwhiti Environment Centre to run composting workshops. They run them free of charge. Can't remember how many they do a year, but at the end of it, you get a free composting bin as part of that. So the TEC do have that, which we do fund as well.
Councillor Shortland.
Thank you. What's the lifespan, the expected lifespan of a wheelie bin? I've got friends in Hawke's Bay, and I believe in the game that there'll be quite a bit of trouble with bins not lasting very long. And secondly, what's the future of the little black currant bins we've all got?
So to answer the first part of your question, the lifespan of wheelie bin is 10 years, and they're usually taken back and they have replaceable parts. So it's all in a circular system. And that's further details that we work out is when do we replace them, what do we cover, and what do the tenants cover, depending how the damage happened. And I've been in discussions with my manager and my team about that and how we're going to shape that and what the rules are around that are going to be. And to the second part of your question with the little black bin, the little black bin may be a part of the new system that we implement, but that's for a future report when I've actually done a good analysis into that and what that's going to look like and how we're going to do that.
Thank you. Just on the back of Councillor Seymour's comment, I know Whakatane Potiki works really, really well. And I'm now having to use the transfer station, and it's a flat fee regardless of what I take of $3. So, yeah. Sorry. The most frustrating part is you've got to use a credit card.
All right, thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. It always amazes me since the ban of the single-use plastic bags that we wrapped every 5 kilos of our rubbish in another single-use plastic bag. But and unfortunately, with the current system, we do actually encourage more landfill into our system because it's cheaper to buy a $3 ticket and dump things than it is to take your excess recycling down to the waste station. So I think as part of this assessment of costs and climate change, whether we can consider the time impact of actually the current recycling system, which involves a lot of people going into the waste transfer system every week and actually taking their own recycling and also dumping rubbish. So I like that the time impact and even the cost of travel and climate change of the vehicles going there constantly to be considered as well, because when we're selling this decision, and I haven't met a single ratepayer that doesn't want rubbish bins, but when we're selling the financial impact, I think that would be a good thing because the time value of money, and for me to go there every week and spend $20 of my time when I could just have a recycling wheelie bin. So
yeah, cool.
And the capitalist in me isn't actually that upset that the Black Sack share price will crash.
Okay, thank you. I think we've thrashed this out really well. Good to see some progress on this, that's for sure. So this noting paper has been moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by Councillor Gregory. All those in favour?
Aye.
Okay, we've got one more paper, Wairakei Transformation Program update. We've got workshops at 11 o'clock. Do you want to have a cup of tea now or wait for after the next paper? Sorry?
Push it through and then.
Push it through, yep, okay. Wairakei Transformation Program update. Amy England. This paper.
Yeah, Councillor Dowsing does presentation.
Jumping the gun there, Councillor Wharehinga.
What's that, sorry?
Jumping the gun a bit.
Yeah, I was seconding Councillor Dowsing's moving of the paper.
Oh,
yeah,
the previous one.
No, this one. Yeah.
Morena koutou, you can take the paper as read. There are no more updates from when it was written.
Any questions?
I'd just like to highlight that it was a well-written paper, and the wildling pine control and other control measures in there seem like the most important thing to understand at this stage. And it's good to see that the regeneration sites without planting are doing well and coming through with varied species. So exciting stuff going on up there. Thanks.
Through the chair, thank you. Yes, wilding pine is the biggest risk to the success of the overall program. We're seeing really extensive growth of wilding pine up there, and having a good program in place to keep on top of that is going to be really critical going forward.
Councillor Faulkner.
Great paper, thank you. I've just got a couple of questions. Point number 10, what are our ETS obligations up there currently?
The ETS obligations differ depending on the class of land, whether it's pre-1990 or post-89. And I've got some further information on that coming through the workshop this afternoon for you, if you'd like to.
So
leave it to them.
don't, okay, so we're that one. And point 25. Yeah. Just wondering where we're at with the additional information out of the evaluation panel.
Through the chair, the evaluation panel has met with the preferred supplier and then met again to discuss next steps forward, and we'll be bringing all of that to you this afternoon also.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Okay, we've got Councillor Seymour.
Thanks very much. Thank you for the paper and bringing it back to us. It's a great paper. I just like to acknowledge that Amy Field Day, but it's really good to see the growth in that patch. It's the same area we went to, one of the areas that council has gone to when we went to the first year. And the Monica in particular, really good. The issues around weeds and pests are something that we're really trying to do about restoration. It's going to be an issue. So thanks for the paper, and I think it'd be great to council. This is a very big investment on our funds and obviously ratepayers' funds.
Hey, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have any indication of the potential cost to control the wilding pine situation? Like a realistic indication of what this is going to cost, like now and then moving forward, say for the next 5 years?
Through the chair. So we have budgeted around $1,100 a hectare for wilding pine control. And we estimate that each area is going to need at least 3 hits of wilding pine control. That might drop off over time. For example, the first round of control where pines are very thick, you might spend your whole $1,100 per hectare on that. In future years, with the pine growth coming through from the seed bank being not quite so much, the costs may be a little less. We're in the process at the moment. We've mapped all of our areas out to 2026, and we're setting up a procurement process. So as part of that process, we will be determining exactly how much we expect this to cost over the next 4 years out to 2026.
Thank you, Amy. So when will that information be put before us?
Through the chair, potentially next quarterly update. Don't have a timeline on that procurement process just yet. Those figures, though, shouldn't be too difficult to work out for us, so we could probably bring that to you next quarterly update.
How many hectares are we talking about that are going to require wilding pine control?
Through the chair, at the moment, we've got around about 400 hectares that requires control, and harvest is still progressing We've got another 300 hectares where they are road lining at the moment, and we'll be starting harvest in over the next couple of years. So they will come online in total. If we include the 29% that's supposed to go back into second rotation, we've got 1,100 hectares.
And that $1,100 per hectare for control, is that per round of control or per annum?
Correct, per round of control.
Right. So several $1 million worth of wilding pine control potentially.
I'm
Several
sorry?
$1 million worth of wilding pine control.
Correct.
Through the chair, some of those costs do sit with JNL as part of their handback of some of that land as well, though. So that's not all borne by council. That's part of the arrangement with Duke and Issue Limited.
Councillor Sheldrake.
Thank you. So just on these wilding pines, so I take it the spray, is it a helicopter spraying?
Through the chair, our approach at the moment generally is not to helicopter spray, so that's why the costs are quite high. We're trying to undertake manual control wherever possible. However, in some places, we've assessed that that is not going to be the best approach, particularly in areas where we have very little regen and we need to get an implant and the pine growth is very high. So where the risk of aerial spraying is low in terms of any effect on the waterways, and we determine that an aerial spray is the better option, then that's what we'll do.
How are these pines?
Oh,
They're just tiny little things.
they range from this
Yeah,
to
yeah.
a couple of meters, depending on how quickly you can get in there and control them.
Okay, Councillor Faringa.
I just want to, like we've already spoken about it a few times in regards to the wilding pines. I just want to kind of bring the attention to the table. I was down in Queenstown, Wanaka, and they've got a really massively bad wilding pine situation down there. They're just growing everywhere. So like prior to actually seeing all that devastation in action, I didn't really fully comprehend the potential problem that we could be dealing with until I saw that down there. It was, yeah, it's rife, and the community are basically, there's all of these signs all over it saying, you know, urging the councils down there to do something about it, but these are so far gone, they're tens of meters high and all of this kind of stuff. So I really applaud the work that we're doing in regards to this, in regards to our wilding pines here. I would hate for that situation to be something we're on the coast.
That's Simon.
Oh, I'm just going to say, in response to Councillor Faringa's comment, that's absolutely true. And Central Otago has a huge problem with them in the Mackenzie Basin as well. And that's the reason that some people were concerned about this project in the beginning, because it was going to be a huge cost on ratepayers and other funds. And it's great that other funds have been found, but there was an awareness by some people around the table that to turn such a large tract of land into native was going to have an ongoing cost. Particularly because of wilding pines, but also because of pests and weeds, and the pests are mentioned in here too. And there's obviously an issue over access for some, and which will continue to sit there along with the project. But thanks for the work that you're doing.
Okay, noting report, and it's been moved by Councillor Dowsing, seconded by Councillor Faringa. All those in favour?
Aye.
All right, that's the end of our meeting. So I'll declare our meeting closed,
10:30.
and we will break for a cuppa.
10:30 we come back for our workshop.
And 10:30.